I thought this would be an interesting session to have after we've had a couple special guests come in and sort of describe how generative AI and LLMs and the different technologies work. To sort of hear from each other as to what potential value we see with this technology, within maybe support centers or intranets, that sort of thing, as it relates to, knowledge management capabilities. I've got a couple that I'm happy to share that I've sort of been working with my clients on to do some analysis to see where there may be unlocked value. But I might, open it up to everybody else to kick things off. Where are you seeing potential use cases? Have you tried anything yet? What success or lack thereof have you seen? That sort of thing. And then again, I've got some ideas that I can throw out there, including some of the specific analysis that some of my clients are doing to look for those, potential solutions. But anybody brave enough to throw out what you and your team is doing on this topic?
I'll go, Scott. John Schmay.
Yeah, thanks, John.
I'm trying to see if I can see everybody here. Here we go. So I'm John Schmay from Verint. I'm the go-to-market for KM. And like everybody else, I don't know if you sent this. Sorry, Jeffrey raised his hand, but I'll keep going. I don't know about everybody else, but there's a cartoon you might have sent me, Scott. I don't know what GPT is, but I want it.
Yeah.
So did I send you that cartoon?
No, you need to though.
So
that sounds about right.
Yeah. So it's pretty funny. And then so in a nutshell, where we found the most traction to start with is in the GPT summarization capability. So it can take a body of text and summarize and tell you what it's about. That's one of the main things it does well, just from the public site. And that capability can be extended to knowledge objects. So we've got a variety of use cases that leverage auto summarization, both in knowledge management and upstream in some call management tools where we can summarize the previous interaction through text analytics, and then if it has to pass to another support agent, you're able to summarize what's happened so far. That's really useful. And then from the next one, when you're finished with the call, you want to do wrap up. That often takes a lot of time, and we can summarize that. So those are two use cases that have a lot of value. The one inside of KM, there's several emerging from KM, but the one that we have already built has to do with summarizing text from objects that appear to be too long. And it's not just dumping a whole 20-page object in a GPT. That's sort of useless. It's more like targeting areas of a document that should by themselves be knowledge objects. And instead of making the user grovel around all that content in a long document or compromising it when it shows up in search because it's so long and has so many terms, the authors can select sections of the document they think would be amenable to auto summarization, pull that into our authoring workflow, and then start using a more summarized object to start. So that sort of jumpstarts authoring and also helps you correct, external objects that have been spidered or objects in your collection that are too long. And that's really useful, obviously, for improving the quality of objects, but it also can be used to jumpstart knowledge base creation. If you've got a bunch of stuff that came from the back end of your business and you don't know what to do with it because it just seems really long or complex, this can get you started on figuring out what to ferret out in there. So we've got some stuff going. There's some more things going that I won't talk about yet because we haven't really completed building them yet. But I will say, just a placeholder for the rest of this or another conversation, Scott, is the part I'm keenly interested in that a lot of people are talking about is, how can GPT or large language models auto create some content from some information you've trained it on? And that's a complex topic, and it's really provocative, right? It goes to the heart of what all us KM people think is the core thing in KM is, authors create content. So how does that ability to auto generate content relate to a subject matter expert's need to not just format that information, but also assess its accuracy, wrap other information around it? Because the last thing I'll say is GPT, as it is right now in the public domain, is more of a reductive technology, right? It'll help you summarize stuff. It has magic to it because it'll summarize amazingly. But where does it really fit in authoring? So I'll stop there because you didn't ask me to speak to that, but that's the part I'm keenly interested in.
No, this is really good. Thanks, John. Are you able to share what specific technologies you guys are looking at for those different use cases, or do you maybe let clients use their own LLM where you guys are just feeding the data out of the case, for example? Or
Well, I'm not in a position to say that right now. We are
okay.
using standard GPT technology for some of it. The other thing that's happening in my business is Verint has created a what we call a Da Vinci AI hub. So we've got a whole a set of a lot of researchers who are extending that technology already and building off of some large data sets we have. So that's something I probably shouldn't talk about in an open forum just yet, but I gave you as much detail as I could on the kind of applications we're building.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. And it looks like Jeff has his hand up. Jeff, did you have any examples to share?
Well, thanks, Scott, for giving me this opportunity. And I think we've exchanged some email about what I'm trying to work on here. So I'm sure no one really knows me. My name is Jeff Vargas. I'm the Director of Knowledge Management for Paramount, the media and entertainment company, or collection of companies, I should say. And I'm doing a lot of investigation as to how AI is going to impact the future of KM. And so the goal there is to bring the whole company, starting with their streaming business, up into the 20th century. Because we're not even at the 21st century yet. We're still doing things in very traditional ways. We're not using the right tools, or we're using too many tools. So we've got overlapping technologies that do the same things, and there's no standardization, things like that. So I'm really looking for opportunities to leapfrog some of the things that we might have transitioned to if we had done this starting 10 years ago. And I'm trying to pull the company up. Yeah. Is there a question? Okay. Anyway, so I'm doing a lot of research, and what I'm trying to do is map the technologies and the use cases to the KM life cycle. I've seen a ton of demos. They all focus on discovery and search, as well as the summarization, which are all very valuable, of course, but we know the life cycle contains other activities. How do we maintain it? How do we make sure that it all has ownership? How do we identify content that's no longer valuable? And how do we make those judgments? I think there are a lot of opportunities to explore those areas, but none of the vendors that I've met with have really drilled down into that aspect of it. And so there's plenty out there that'll do the search, they'll solve that problem for us. They may even solve the issue of multiple repositories across the company and summarizing this content, not just from one source, but from many separate sources. But when we identify where the bulk of the content is there an opportunity to reduce our technical footprint and our overhead? Can it give us some understanding of that as well? So if anyone has solved this problem and has all this information, I'd love to connect with you. But that's really my big push right now, is to develop that information.
Hey, we've got Eric Immerman from Proficient. Eric, have you had any clients dealing with similar challenges like that?
We definitely have, but I'm not going to promise we've solved anything as of yet. There's been some POCs that I'm probably not super at liberty to discuss, where we're working in certain of these areas to try to, for example, not only summarize content, but also kind of judge its quality and those sorts of things, or give some sort of indication of quality. But this is still, for even for what we were doing, very much a moving, I'll call it a moving target or an incremental approach we're taking to it.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Jeff. Anybody else have any use cases they want to throw out there?
See, that shows you what a brave soul I was, Scott.
Yeah, always. Maybe just to elaborate on that example, some of the examples you shared, John.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about the challenges we've seen already.
Yeah.
So I debuted this at our company conference with all our customers and stuff. And so I was in the booth for quite a long time showing this thing off. And you get the full spectrum, right, of people coming in going, oh, can I use GPT for everything? And then you got other people saying, I want to use it for this, for this very specialized use case that I don't even know if it'll work. But then when people started to hone in on the summarization task itself, we started to expose the fact that there's some other human decisions that go into that loop, at least for what we're building first, which is, there's summarization. And, I think we just hinted at a minute ago, like, okay, I have this content, I want to summarize it. And then the question comes up, how do I, author, subject matter expert, determine what it is I want to summarize? Now, obviously, I can look at stuff and eyeball it, and I can tell pretty quickly if it's something I want to summarize. But then when you have a long document, some of our documents, are like, especially some of this spidered stuff, and at Coveo, you must be well familiar with these documents. You have these sources that are just, policy, procedure, databases, what have you. You have to be careful about the judgments you make about what you're going to summarize, and not because the technology won't summarize it well. It's that there's kind of a sweet spot, and you may need to iterate on it. And I don't know if you want this much detail, Scott, but it's like when you get, and I ran into this trying to demo it for people, right? I would demo some section and would come back with like a step table. And that was the whole summarized document. I'm like, well, there's no background here. I really can't tell what you're supposed to do with this. It doesn't tell any exceptions. And so you end up going back to the source document to see if any of that stuff's in there. And now you sort of compromise the efficiency of what you're trying to do. Likewise, if you select too small a collection, you get the same content back. That certainly shows you put in a paragraph, you get a paragraph back that you haven't said anything to the summarization engine. And then finally, the most important bit, and this goes back to the question I had about how we index, for the large language models, how we tune them for a domain, right? So the summarization engine out in the public domain doesn't really know that much about my support organization. It doesn't know much about the products I sell, the tendencies of my customers, what kinds of programs I'm trying to sell. So that's the other part where you have to be careful, where it can summarize what you have, but it is presuming that what you sent is already what, buried in that is the nuggets of what you need. It won't add to that.
Yeah.
So you got to think about, what of that is valid. Now, for reducing, so one of the documents we used for the demo was a policy document from a government agency. That's great. It's already curated. It's already focused on the task I need to ask about. I don't make that kind of content. I just need it for reference, which is why I would have indexed it into my knowledge base from an external source, because they wrote the thing, they know the truth, they have, they're the source of truth. That works, because now I'm just pulling through that information in a support format. But we have to be aware, and this isn't going to be an ongoing thing for quite some time, years. How do we use this technology and not take shortcuts, right? And not just say, oh, I'm just going to summarize this and that's my knowledge object, or I'll add a little bit to it, make sure it's not biased. So anyway, those are some of the things that came up as I let users drive, right? I said, okay, try to be really, user friendly. Like, okay, what would you type in here? Here's the document, pick some part of it, and then you can, send it out there. And sometimes we wouldn't get back what we wanted. So it's going to take a lot of sort of testing, but more importantly, in the support context, you've got this pesky thing called a user, and the user and the customer have their own opinion about what they think the document should be. So we want to accommodate that, because part of the knowledge curator's job is to look at who's the audience I'm writing for, what can I presume they know or don't know about the terminology in my products, and what kind of information does my organization want to impart? Not just what some machine says is the most logical information given the content I gave it. And that's
Yeah.
a whole human judgment bit that's not in the technology at this point.
Yeah, that's great. And maybe to extend that point a little bit, and then Paul, I see your hand raised. I'll circle back to that. This is like, can you guys see my screen again? Because I was sharing it when I thought I wasn't, and now I hope to be sharing it correctly.
We see a Word doc.
Okay, so this is like one of the things that I've started with doing some analysis on, looking at within a CRM system, you know, hey, show me all the examples or occurrences or whatever it may be from the case volume, right? So whatever that table may be, where especially with a closed case, where multiple documents were linked to that case. And so, you know, an agent, as we've all experienced either in our personal life while we're waiting for the person to, you know, put us on hold and go look up a bunch of things, or, you know, I certainly see this in the call centers with my clients of, you know, there's a how to diagnose document, then there's a how to log into the server to reboot it or whatever, you know, I'm just making up examples here. And I've been trying to analyze how often this, as well as several other situations exist where could generative AI sort of replicate what an agent normally does in taking the multiple documents, especially as John mentioned, where, you know, you've got like a 75-page PDF and you really need to jump to page 11, you know, for that one paragraph, summarize that information from multiple documents and then push that to, you know, I guess upstream, so to speak, to a self-service deflection candidate, and then to sort of correlate some of the examples you gave, John. What I've been really interested in is maybe taking the case summary from a select group of cases that we audit and see how often that may be, let's say, similar to the generated answer. The other thing is, even if we look at situations where there's only one document linked to a closed case, could it be that the agent had to reformulate the answer, right? So they're taking the details, the specifics, but then maybe summarizing it in a less technical manner, or, you know, even from a language standpoint, right? Taking an English document and reading it back in French or something like that. So that's the type of analysis I've been trying to do with my customers to see, to go beyond the cartoon of what John mentioned, right? Like, okay, this GPT thing, it's in the news a lot, but where's the actual problem, right? We've got a case of hammers, but are there any nails that need hammered in kind of thing? I'm curious, John and anybody else, what you think of that idea of like sort of auditing the past to see where generative AI may have been able to automate that answer delivery.
That's a pretty clever idea. I think the one thing that we're working from today is this notion of what we see right now for GPT, leveraging this large corpus of testing and analytics data from the public domain, which is pretty slick for lots and lots of use cases publicly. But the kind of stuff you're talking about here starts to hedge into my fundamental question, which is this thing about what information is it using for its reasoning, and what support information can it use to gather that reasoning, and that requires a data set. And so that's to me that's the underlying question in some of these more high value targeted use cases is, if you're gonna start trying to make judgments about your own support content, aside from just summarizing it from a general summarization engine, you want to start making judgments about how past events should correlate to your current business rules, your current content. There needs to be some reasoning behind that understands the aspects of your business. And that's why I think it becomes critical to have a corpus of information that's relevant to your business. That's why we're building this AI hub, because then, you know, assembling a large enough data set, which for the public GPT is billions of data objects, you've got to get something like that going. And then you can do a lot of these really cool reasoning things, and then you can pass it out to lots of different tools for lots of different use cases. That's the philosophy we're pursuing. I didn't answer your question except to say you need more data, which is, I think, is a common question.
Yeah, because obviously this capability is dramatically more expensive. And so what I'm been trying to focus on is where's the potential value that could be, unlocked, thus looking retrospectively back at, in my experience, both personally and the agents I've seen, a lot of things that bleed through to the call center fall into a couple categories. One is it was kind of a diverse process to get through from diagnosis to, solution implementation to testing, where the agent would sort of summarize all that back. And so one example there that I think we all have in our personal right is we may have an inquiry at work like, hey, I need to take some time off, right? And it's like, well, I got to go to this system to look up what my PTO balance is. And then I need to go to this system to see like what type of time off would this be? If there's an exception, like I don't have a high enough balance, blah, blah, blah. And then I got to go to this system or may not be system, but different screen or different process to actually make the request. And there's just a lot of stuff there that, could be potentially summarized back to the user as to a mixture of data indicating maybe what your balance is. And then, hey, you're within policy or you're outside of policy. So here's the exception options. And then, finally, here's a link to the process to make that request. And here's, a couple tips about doing it. I think those are the types of things that I find very interesting with Gen AI. Hey, Paul, I know you've had your hand raised for a few minutes. You want to jump in?
I'll just say hello first. Just say hello and show you who I am. So I'm not a bot. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, thanks.
Welcome from the west coast of Ireland. So I just want to say, John, they were all banging good points, like absolutely on point. So just around, like, obviously we're kind of targeting here just a little bit on summarization as one element of that generative AI, and it is only one element. But just want to say that what we're seeing as useful is when you're handing a conversation over from one person to another, or an agent is coming to a conversation, they get a quick summary and it goes, hey, this is someone who came in, they wanted to pay a bill, they got in some difficulty, and now they're just looking to find the right option, right? Let's say that's your summary. So the agent comes in, they get their little summary, and they kind of know where to go first, second, and third. Now, even with just something as simple as presenting a summary so that someone can orientate themselves to the conversation, I think that the extent to which you have to have that as explainable AI might not be completely obvious to everybody. You are presenting a summary of that conversation, and you've got to be able to explain why you summarized it in that way, how you summarized it, why some things were maybe more prominent than others, or why other things weren't included in it. And I think that has, to the best of my knowledge, received very little attention from people looking to use this kind of solution. And just to take an example that we have is, like, we look at customer conversations at Webio and say, oh, this person's voicing concerns, talking about their life in some way that would lead us to believe that this person is currently vulnerable. They are financially vulnerable. They are maybe vulnerable personally or health-wise. And it is legally obliged on our customers, the credit departments, to say, okay, we've recognized that this person is in some difficulty. We now have to take some very specific paths to try and address this person's vulnerability. Now, imagine if that vulnerability, for whatever reason, was not included in your summary, and you were dealing with someone who was very vulnerable. They might be in the process of being made homeless from rent not being received or a payment not going through as it should have been. You've passed on a summary and you haven't included the fact that they're vulnerable. That could be significant later on. So the point around summarization and its value, I think, is well made in terms of passing one context or passing it from one person to another. But the thing that just doesn't get kind of teased out is, hey, how is that summarization happening, and what are the potential implications of that later on for how people act or make decisions? So that's I'll stop there because I'm Irish and I could talk forever.
No, that's really good. I appreciate that. Anybody have any anything to add on to there? Any ideas about how to mitigate that issue?
I feel like I'm talking too much, Scott, but I find this topic really interesting. Other folks, feel free to jump in. I just want to point out that I think, Paul, you start to identify there's probably a half dozen or more dimensions, just like the one, the personality of the person I'm talking to, things about what the organization, what group you're coming from, right? What's the job of the person? What's my job to service that person? There's just probably 10 or more, the more I think about it, attributes of, you call them personalization or maybe positive bias. I don't know what term you use for it, but I think there's two cases here. We're starting with, let's take the data and the subject matter experts in our business, but you're hinting at a whole nother set of parameters, which is, support. I like to say support sits on the front line between customers and the business. That's an obvious thing to say, but it has ramifications because the business creates content for its own purposes. It's got its own back end things it needs to create, blah, blah, blah. The customer couldn't care less about that from a knowledge access standpoint. They want their problem, their question solved. And so the support's job is to broker those two things into a positive solution using the organization's information for the customer need. And I think you were just pointing out that the organization's information is useful. And we do, as I said, we got some summarization tools, but it leaves off the whole dimension of the customer, who they are, what their current state is. I'll give another example kind of along your point, Paul, like retention. Like, I don't know how many of you organizations have retention queue. I know I've talked to a lot of support organizations over the years, and a lot of cell phone companies, for example, have retention queues. There's people get angry at cell phone companies. They sell a program, and the program expires, and they don't get it anymore. All this stuff, And retention queues specifically focused on what's happening emotionally or mentally for the customer. I'm probably going to give them some kind of a reward or something, but I need to know where they're coming from in order to give them a proper answer. And so that's the kind of part of the whole mindset of the customer. That's a really interesting topic. How do you model that? Right? Is that something you add later as a modifier to? I mean, we have a hard time writing that kind of stuff today.
You kind of dealt with that. I think you kind of hinted at where that was probably going to get solved, and it was in two bits. One was in your being specific about your company data. So, like, we've got a prejudiced view, as they say, which is that we believe that you should have your own LLM. So every company of any kind of scale should have their own LLM, and you should have a custom LLM trained on your data and on your customer interactions, and because they're specific to your company. And however different it is from whatever other model you're forking off of, you're dealing with your own models, you're dealing with your own AI, you're training it on your own labels, you're doing your own data. Like we think that you should have tip to toe your own custom LLM. And inside in that, it means that you've got your own embeddings, you've got your own contexts, right, built into that, especially if you're training it up with the right kind of labeling and conversational labeling. So I think that kind of leads into, that's great, but where does all that data sit? And I think I'm not sure but there's two elements. One was, I think you were talking about CDP, like a customer data platform of some sort, that all your clients' data is in like one place, and when they're talking to that customer, they've access to the data that they need to answer the conversational interactions with that customer. And the other thing you were saying, I believe, is that that data should be as clean as possible, so that if you're generating anything off it, at least you're sure that the basic data you're working off is correct, and that any any kind of variations of it can be observed and then kind of like fixed, once identified. So
I hope folks are digging this deep dive conversation, because you gave me a couple of ideas that I'll respond to. One is, that's correct. We have a common data platform. One advantage we have from Verint, we sell 40 different support products. And we have like this huge database from 20 years of call recordings, right? So I've already got data around what customer interactions we've seen. The one idea you just gave me, which is really interesting, and this is why I was saying earlier, we have research guys working on this stuff, so there may be already something afoot. We have a text analytics, speech analytics product, actually two products, that measure sentiment, and they have a whole set of reasoning around sentiment, and I don't know how that combines. That's not my area of expertise, but if you could meld the sentiment knowledge that we've accrued from tons and tons of interactions with the data, right, such that you can figure out what kind of information you want to give to somebody based on some perceived sentiment, we might get closer to your initial example about how that would work. And then the second thing I wanted to comment on is this clean data thing. Many of you know Seth Early, I suspect, from the early group. His next expertise in knowledge, ontologies and taxonomies has just put him right in the center of this whole AI thing. It's great, because he's written a new book, or last year a new book, on AI and architecture. And his tagline is, there is no AI without IA. He's like, it's garbage in, garbage out, guys. You could have 1 billion documents, but if they're not clean and they're all sort of diverse formats, you're not going to get anywhere. And so he along those lines, one of the things we're building alongside of this is an enterprise data hub. And one of the things in the ingestion mechanism of that is a data normalization function, right? So you have to, and so this is way cool, right? Especially with the cloud. One of the things that folks don't talk about enough, in my view, is none of this would happen with a lot of on-premise crap. You've got to, apologies to those of you who have on-premise crap. I have on-premise crap too. But in the cloud, I can see everybody's stuff. Now, I've got to scrub it. I can't be giving out company-specific information. There's a whole bunch of security concerns. We know that. But if I can normalize it in a way that just extrudes out the part that's relevant for this exercise, then I have a consistent data set that can play across lots and lots. I won't say millions or billions, but it's along that order. And then I can start to, now I've got that clean data you were talking about, Paul, right? I've got this information, and it's just fascinating the number of use cases that fall out, right? We just discussed a sentiment-based use case, right? And I'm keenly interested in this idea that I think other vendors are touting already. And I need, it's hard to get to pin people down that say they do AI, because is it manageable AI? How far does it extend? What does it really do? I mean, the minute AI came out, all the knowledge vendors put AI in front of their product. I put AI in front of my search tool. Well, I had AI, but it's hard to ferret out what people are actually doing. And when they say, I actually have a corpus of your company's knowledge that I already used to author content, boy, that sounds compelling and interesting, but I can't get anybody to explain it to me. So this is our challenge, is we can dream up this stuff, but we've got to figure out how to take logical steps. I gave a presentation at CAM World in 2019 about, it's all about targeting your use cases. With AI, you've got to target it, and you have to be reasonable at what you expect to do. So I'll stop pontificating. I just find the subject interesting. Scott, please encourage others to speak.
Yeah, one other thing to sort of go with a super basic idea that I've been finding with my clients, at least, that sort of speaks to Paul's comment about context of transitions, is how often are cases coming into the call center where, and we see this all the time, right? agent uses the exact same document to solve the case that the customer either viewed or could have viewed. And so one of the things I've been really focusing on that I'm curious to get everybody's opinion on is, why did that happen, right? Did the customer just not want to click through to it? Or I think in many cases, when I've talked to customers and done surveys or whatnot, it's that the facts were there, but they weren't in a voice that the customer could understand. And that could be everything from, different language issues to, it was too technical, I'm not technical, that sort of thing. I'm curious to get everybody's thoughts. We've kind of talked about shifting maybe from one agent to another, but what about, can we prevent escalations by using generative AI to simply output the same general answer, but in a more personalized fashion? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I do, unless someone else jumps in.
You know,
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Just on the simple, like really, like just keeping it really simple. When somebody says, well, just like, okay, I'd like to pay a bill. Great. What date do you want to pay it on? Last Friday of the month. How much do you want to pay? I'd like to pay this. Can I pay it in 2 parts? Right. And back and forth and back and forth. It's called conversational turns. If you can just have the ability or prompt someone to say, tell us what you want, what you're trying to achieve today, or what you'd like to achieve today. And they say, well, I've got a bill from you guys. I'm not sure that it's correct, but if I can pay $20 at the end of the month on the last Friday, that would be great. And if you could just then email me to tell me that that's all right, because I'm really busy right now. And that's the end of their message, right? AI is picking out all the bits of that message and saying, this is what it's about. Here are the 2 or 3 topics or subjects in here. Here's the one that you should pay attention to and deal with that first, or maybe say that that's the main message and get them to confirm that that's the bit they'd like to deal with first. So what you can do is, it's called kind of, you're trying to disambiguate that. You're trying to figure out what's the main thing, figure out what all the parts of that are, and what you'd need to do to reach that goal. So the AI is figuring out last Friday of the month. What is that? It's a date. Okay. What date exactly is it, given that today is one date and the end of the month is another? Got to figure that out. You might have some rules in the background saying, well, that's 10 days away, but we need a payment from this person by the end of the week, not the end of the month. So that's a rule that you have in the background. So the AI is figuring out all the bits, and then it's kind of clarifying them and it's checking them, and then it's coming back and it's figuring out, what am I going to lead off with this question? Or can I give them a combined answer to say, hey, Paul, that's all fine. You can pay the $20 at the last Friday of the month. That's not a problem. We'll send you an email to that effect to your email address. Is it still? And then just give them the email address and just say yes if all this is good. The customer presses yes. They go, that was really good. And it's a really simple interaction. It doesn't really seem like I haven't generated a monkey on the planet with a cheese sandwich with a text prompt, right? But that's how companies are actually using that stuff today. And right in the middle of that is AI. It's AI in the understanding what the text input is. It's AI in figuring out which bits of that are important, and it's also AI in the way the conversation chain works, and that what's the next bit of this conversation that we should ask. This bot, we call it bot to bot interactions. Instead of it just being hardwired, that is an AI driven process too. So quite a lot of that is involving AI today.
And Eric Immerman, let me make sure he's still on. He might have had to drop. Oh, sorry. I think Eric had to drop. Anybody else have any other comments about these subjects? I know Andy mentioned talking about UI design, and Brian also mentioned the chat for video training. I'd love to hear a little bit more about those two if you guys are interested and willing to share.
Hey Scott, this is Brian.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, would start my brief comment on that is we've been discovering some tools and resources out there by different vendors where we can do a lot of what we has already been discussed, where you can take some semblance of what you think you want for like a video training script, run that through a GPT program to have it really kind of condensed and consolidated, and then you can actually take that script and basically plug it into like a generative like video, where you've got like an avatar that when you feed it like the text, I mean, it really looks like
Yeah.
a live person, right? Like doing the training or presenting the material. Obviously, like a lot of contact center agents these days, I mean, they consume almost everything through video. They don't like to really have to read through something. So the more we're able to sort of leverage kind of video training, in very short consumable pieces, and leveraging AI for that, it's speeding up the time that it takes to produce that content, so it's not all being manually produced by our learning and develop team. So we're already finding some efficiencies there where it makes sense to run all of that through generative AI.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that before, but it's funny because like I am not a big video person. I like to scan through text, but I know many's people are different, but I never thought about that before as far as taking a core set of facts or context or whatever and passing it to a different, whether it's video, text, long form text, short summary,
Yep.
And sort of, I don't know, like give it to me brass tacks versus give it to me in a 30-minute video. I'd really like to learn, a lot about this. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Brian,
Yeah.
are you saying that you can convert text to video, or am I overthinking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
What would the video itself look like? How do I visualize that?
Well, the video is literally like, again, you can choose like male, female avatars through like a lot of these products that we're finding, and you can augment like the video that's being produced so that you can include screenshots or diagrams or kind of whatever. But now I don't have to like have my my learning and development team and taking up an actual resource in my company, right, to actually deliver what is like a video training, literally someone speaking, right, and acting as if they're presenting information. That's all being produced now just generatively through these video sort of avatars.
That's really
Hey, Brian, this is Jeff. Quick question for you. It sounds like you've got a centralized team that is starting to use this technology to produce your trainings. Are you anticipating developing training for employees to use AI to develop training for their own purposes? Is that on your roadmap?
That is not on a roadmap. Well, it's a very interesting question. Something I haven't really thought about, but that could certainly be included, right? Like there's definitely some value there.
Yeah, and the thing that I was pondering myself was, how do we develop training for our employees to use these AI tools on their own? Because we've got so much interest internally, and these people are all, covering the same ground, researching the same products on their own. And that's just the tool itself. But what about the prompts? How to develop an effective prompt to get what you want? So it's kind of like the Zen approach to training, where we need to train people on the tool that they are going to develop for training for their audience.
And to be honest with you, the generation that we're we're hiring and bringing in the contact center. I mean, for heaven's sake, my 11-year-old daughter knows how to do better video editing and stuff that I can do using, apps on her phone. Like, it's amazing what they're already like producing and coming up with. And if like you said, if you taught them and you gave them some guardrails on how to leverage GPT, right, to produce training material for themselves, or that could be out there kind of in a wiki, so to speak, right? Like you're really going to empower the generation that's already like using
Yeah,
these tools, right?
exactly right. And so as we develop those kinds of tools or coordinated approaches to identifying all the tools, my question to the group here is, how are you going about identifying which tools you want to assess, and how are you evaluating them so you're comparing apples to apples?
Jeff, I love that question. And then I would want to add on to it. So part of my responsibility in doing this research is to show either how it's impacting revenue or it's making a substantial impact on margin. And so I need to show how the adoption of this tool, whatever tool that we choose to be the right one, how is this going to be substantially cheaper than what we're doing right now? Or how is it going to set us up in the future to be able to do that?
Right. The KPIs haven't been identified yet as to how you're going to measure its effectiveness and all that.
Exactly. Or if we're just using our traditional measures, are we that good at measuring what we do that we can actually show a proof of value? And that is the piece that I am really struggling with.
Yeah. It's a checkbox item today. We want to be able to say that we're using AI effectively in our environments, but we're not even at the point to be able to quantify that. We can just say it's faster, it's easier, it's cheaper, but is it more effective? Is it really cheaper?
Exactly. And will I have to hire less people next year? And that's just a very hard question to answer.
Yeah. And that's beside all the cultural things. A recent example was one of my very technical architects needed to write a blog about his area of expertise. And I suggested, well, use our AI tool, write a blog in 5 seconds. And we did it together, and it literally took 5 seconds. But I could tell there was a little bit of a uncomfortableness from him that this tool created a high level, admittedly general blog about it, whereas he was preparing to spend 2-3 hours crafting it. So he wound up writing it on his own, even though he had that blog which communicated accurate information.
So I had a similar experience, except from the other end. So I live in Maine, and we had a very rare hurricane come through and was kind of devastating to our coast. And we were getting these regular emails from our power company that were just a level above. It was a quantum difference from the emails that we had been getting in the past, just in how eloquent they were describing the situation. And in my mind, I was like, they're using a generative AI a generative AI to write these emails to make them more palatable, to tell us that 36 hours from now, you'll have power back. And in my mind, even though this is what I do, in my mind, I was like, cheaters. Like, I wanted to hear from the head of the company. I didn't want to hear from the AI. So yeah, I think that's going to go both ways, from the person that's producing it and the people that are receiving it.
Exactly. And I came upon an AI tool that evaluates any AI generated content to remove any indicator that it was created by AI. So we're using AI to
to hide the AI.
To hide the AI, yeah, exactly. Because we're trying to, right now deal with the cultural aspects while we explore the capabilities of these tools. It's a very interesting time right now.
Yeah. And then you guys have probably seen the virtual influencers, right? Like I'm similar to Libby. I guess I'm turning into the old man I used to make fun of or criticize, but like I don't know that I want the inauthentic experience, right? Versus there are a lot of tools out there to try to change the voice of the response. And is that laziness or is that genius? I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah. Being in the early stages of all this, and even though AI has been out there for years, the adoption is kind of in the early stages and everyone's scrambling for it. And there's often, as new technologies roll out, there's lots of discussions about the pros and cons. Do we really want to go that way? I personally am trying to cut through a lot of that, or just skip over it for now and just go to the practical deliverable considerations, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to make some decisions about what we should focus on, maybe the 2 or 3 tools that will get us 80% of what we're looking for. I'm just wondering how others are making those decisions as to what 2 or 3 tools should we be looking at to accommodate all our audiences. And that's the other thing, the personas or audiences we're trying to focus on. There's certainly support, call center kinds of uses, but I'm working with a lot of technical architects and engineers who write white papers, blogs, and very detailed specifications about very complex infrastructure. How do we facilitate those people?
And then how do we identify those areas and then communicate very accurately to senior leaders what this is going to do for us and what it will not be able to do for us? Because some senior leaders, you hear the stories all the time about senior leaders who just think we're not going to have to invest in anything in support anymore. Like AI is just going to do it all for us, and being able to accurately describe it's going to do this, it will never do this, or at least not right now.
Yeah, and maybe I'll add my typical candor as an extension onto this. So, I think I'm the only salesperson on the call. What I'm seeing from lots of organizations is there's a gap between maybe what we read about in the news as far as the significant investment that's going to go into these technologies versus more like what Jeff articulated, right? Like, hey, we're going to handle this like any other investment. We're going to only buy intelligently based on value and that sort of thing. And I just find that it's an interesting time. It kind of reminds me of when the internet first, became commercialized, that everybody's excited, but, we're at a certain point, like the scene or whatever from Alice in Wonderland, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Like, where are we trying to go and what road do we want to take and what technologies do we want to invest in? And to Libby's point, what are we trying to accomplish? What do we not think is accomplishable at this point in time? It's really challenging times right now, I find.
It reminds me of when chat first came out and just hit the market. Everybody and his brother implemented chat right away. And then it had at least a 40% fail rate because everybody was trying to do it for too many things.
Yeah.
Shallow. And then everybody got angry at chat. And so, now people are trying to figure out what the thing is. So I'm certain there's a hype cycle happening right now. But I will say one thing, back to exposing my age. 20 years ago, I don't know how many of you are in the customer support consortium, but we were sitting in this meeting about self-help. 20 years ago, self-help was an interestingly new thing. And we had this big meeting with about 15 people in a conference room. We're trying to figure out, well, what are all the barriers to self-help? And we wrote all these things, sharing confidences and what's the right information and can I get sued? And it was kind of stuff that sounds naive today. And we filled up an entire wall with Post-its of the reasons why we couldn't quite get it. And then we asked everybody, well, why would you do it? And they all said, well, because my competitors are doing it. That was the end of the conversation. It's like, I'm willing to run these risks because everybody next to me is figuring it out.
Yeah.
If I jump on the train and start figuring out myself, I can't wait till my competitors show me and tell me what it is I'm supposed to be doing. So
Yeah, that's exactly right. And John, I think you had mentioned earlier this Da Vinci platform for using AI functionality. Eventually, a lot of this is going to consolidate. So there'll be some major players who provide all the various functions that are available through AI, and we'll wind up doing that. But that is going to make it complex for the users to figure out, well, do I use this AI tool for video or do I use that one? And do I use a separate one for audio to my video or do I use this other one? There needs to be some coordination of all this. And my company in particular has a poor record of buying many tools to do the same thing. So I'm just trying to get ahead of that. So if anyone cares to connect about your process of evaluating and what we're trying to do to make sense of it all for our employees, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I just posted an interesting thing into the chat where Forrester, their CEO, sort of broke their typical cautious recommendation approach and basically said, jump right in. I would maybe say, I would change it to say that last sentence that, you must move intelligently now. But yeah, I mean, I love all these analogies, right? There's been situations in the past where companies have wasted a tremendous amount of time and money jumping to the wrong thing. So, there's the opportunity cost of not doing something, but then I'm a firm believer that there's also a cost of doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. But I mean, this is why I love getting us together, because I had some ideas that I want to share. You guys have given me some great ideas. I mean, I think, we're pretty quickly coming to some areas where these can produce tremendous value, both to the people and to the, profit ledger, which I always love doing both.
Well, thank you, Scott, for getting us all together, and I appreciate hearing all of the various perspectives going on here.
Yeah, and
you enable
also
screen sharing? I'll show my cartoon now.
Yeah, absolutely, John. John always has the best slides and cartoons. That's the thing I miss from working with you the most.
I'm the resident smartass.
Did you say you had it to share?
Yeah, I'm ready. Just you disabled screen sharing.
Oh, I did. I don't know. Let me see if I can. I'm just gonna make you the host. That should give you all privileges.
I'm a privileged guy, man.
Should be at the bottom there, about in the middle. There we go. Yep, that sounds about right, huh?
I'm just saying.
And several of you probably know Esteban Kolsky. I know John and I used to work with him. He's got a series of posts on LinkedIn, if you haven't seen them yet, that talks about, this is just asking a computer to do things for us. And so I'm not exactly paraphrasing him. I'm sort of adding my perspective in here as well. But I think whether it's chat bots, email support, we've all talked about where things have failed. I think if we start off with a strategy that's more like this cartoon and less like an intelligent roadmap of what are we actually trying to achieve out of this and how are we going to measure success and adapt when we see failures, that sort of thing. I do worry that generative AI could be the grandest scale of mistakes we've ever seen, because you can just sort of set it loose and let it just start outputting garbage, right? But I've also seen the opposite, where the examples you all have shared, et cetera, where, with the right objective in mind, it can be very powerful. So yeah, if you guys don't mind, I think, it's been a great discussion. We don't have to go the whole 90 minutes. I'll send out the recording to those who couldn't make it. And I might, for this one, try to create like a LinkedIn group or something where we could all, continue to collaborate, on this concept to sort of share where others are finding value, and sort of try that as a next step for this topic. Yeah, I greatly appreciate everybody attending, and hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Scott.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks,
Thank you,
million.
Scott.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
See you later.